everybody is. That's fantastic. Okay, so I have remembered and I've just started our recording. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview. So this class is designed by Kay England, as her name is. She designed the project and put it together as an AccuQuilt program. So Kindred Spirits has purchased the rights to use this program from AccuQuilt, and we in turn are offering it to you as a class. So all of the information that you get in the patterns and whatnot is coming directly from AccuQuilt. I'm adding things on to it because I think it's lacking detail in some places, so I hope that will be helpful. If there's something that's missing, don't hesitate to let me know, and we can change that as we go. So it's going to be 10 monthly sessions on the 4th Tuesday of the month at 10 o'clock. If we get to a point where the store reopens, we may do some in-person meetings, but we will continue to do it online as well, because I know two of you are outside Niagara. Jan, you're not in Niagara either, are you?
I'm in Caledonia.
In Caledonia.
So it's it's not brutal.
Yeah, I've got a brother-in-law in Caledonia, so yeah. Great. So if we do go to a little bit to meeting in person, we'll still video call Marcia and Jan in, because I don't want to put the pressure on them to get in here. So the way they've written the pattern, they've given you yardage requirements. I find typically the AccuQuilt yardage is generous. So, but I haven't gone through enough of the quilt to know how generous it is yet. So what I chose to do for mine, I wanted to make sure that I'm doing my quilt in colors as close to the pattern as possible, just so it's not confusing when you're watching videos and when I'm teaching. The only color I've switched out is I've changed from red to pink, just because I thought the red was a bit over the top with everything else in my color scheme. I am going a mix of scrappy and purchased yardage. So for the bigger pieces, the main print and the navy, is that all? I think there's only those two, and the background, I've purchased yardage. And then all of the other colors, I'm going scrappy, but sticking to their color scheme. Just a couple of tips for organizing. What I typically do when I'm working on a project is keep it in one of those 12 by 12 scrapbooking totes. I'm kind of breaking my own rules in this a little bit, because once I've prepared my fabric and found the grain, I'm trying to leave it organized, lined up, so that it's ready to go through the cutter and I don't have to find that again. What one of our ladies at Kindred does when she's got extra pieces and she's working on an AccuQuilt project, she just stores them in a little tub numbered for the die number. So if you're cutting and you've got a few extra half square triangle pieces, which is die number 5, if you've got 3 extra pink ones or green, whatever it is this time, just keep them all together, because next month when you're coming, you may use those again. So that's one way that she does it. She actually does them in little takeout containers from the Chinese restaurant. She just writes a number on them and has them all lined up on a shelf and tosses them in as she goes. And then when she goes to a retreat or something, she just stacks all her containers together in one big pile, and out she comes with everything ready to go. The die requirements you may have seen in the introductory piece literature from AccuQuilt. This project uses the Qube, which is the first set of 8 dies. It also uses the corners and the angles, which are the second sets, the corners, second and third corners and angles. The first month, I think there was only one piece that we required from, it was die number 9 was the one that is in, I believe it's in the angles set. Otherwise, everything was in the corners and the original Qube. It also calls for the strip dies. I'm comfortable enough cutting strips that I don't have all the strip dies. So again, if you don't have them all, you will still be able to complete the project, because those are just cutting straight pieces. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. I think most of us are doing this with the 8-inch Qube. Is it Jan, you're doing it with the 9?
I am, and I actually drew it in EQ.
You did, okay.
I did, which
That was
I'm
a big
pretty new
job.
to. You know what? It wasn't bad considering I'm a real newbie. So I have a class in EQ, my first class in EQ tonight, but it wasn't bad. So I can actually post it or send it to you. It's at
Okay.
least a coloring book stage right now.
Yep.
I actually put my fabric in. I don't know if you can see it, but I actually
Oh, that's
did.
terrific.
I did actually scan my fabric in because I wanted to do it with Canada fabric, which is really busy.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it too much, which I might play with a little bit, but you can fussy cut, you can do all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
but it will give you yardage as well in EQ.
For those of you that don't know, EQ, and they're currently on version 8, I believe, EQ8 is a quilt design software. It's developed, I think it's more than 20 years old. They are headquartered in Ohio. Jan, if you ever get the chance to attend their academy sessions in Ohio, I did it a couple of years ago. They are fantastic.
Really?
I learned more in 2 days there than I would have learned in years working on it on my own. So you can build out a quilt block by block, piece by piece. So
Yes,
that's what
you can.
and then you import.
So I actually did the top 3 blocks as well, which are repeating. I just couldn't see the internal ones well enough. But you can do it like a coloring book, but it also gives you yardage when you're done. So, and then once you design them, you can change the size pretty easily.
Yes.
Then you know exactly what kind of yardage you need.
And just so you know, I have taken our plea to AccuQuilt and talked to our contacts there and begged them to please, next time they do a project like this, give us the EQ files, because I know darn well they've done it and they've got them all ready to go. So it would be very useful, especially because if someone has, say, I'm using
the 12. Yeah,
I'm using the store's 8-inch cube. I own the 12. If I was going to make this exact quilt with the 12-inch, it would cover a football field. So exactly. I needed to, I would like to have done some work in EQ, make the calculations much, much easier. Okay.
Well, I can send that to you when I get done. I have my first class in that tonight. I just bought the books and just kind of muddled through like with my stapler, and and I didn't do bad. So considering, I'll tell you how I do, but I'll try and send that. I can post the links if anyone wants to use this as their sample block, that they could print the coloring thing out anyway. I can post that afterwards.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. Yep. So the next thing I'd like to do is, I'm going to give it a whirl anyways. I'm going to do a quick tour of our Facebook group just to show you where everything is. And here we go. There we go. Okay, so you can see, ladies, you can all see the group showing up now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to hide that menu to clear it up a little bit. So this is our header page. You can see my mouse as well, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we post things, they come up just like your regular Facebook feed, they come up here. So you can see I put in the meeting ID and passcode again in here this morning, just as a reminder. You can come back. This is a document we're going to look at today that I put in last night, section 1, assembly instructions, etc. Here's Marsha's beautiful fabrics. Those things are all listed in this section here, which is called discussion. The next tab over here is units, and this is where a lot of our content is going to be stored. So unit 1, I called getting started. So here's the different documents available in unit 1. Okay. Just by a quick show of hands, how many of you watched the preparing fabric video? Okay, I can see 4 of you. That's good. And what about the perfect seam allowance video? How many watched that? No. Okay. Oh, thank you. Marsha's giving me a thumbs up. Whew, she's used this Zoom before. Okay, the perfect seam allowance, somehow, I don't know where it went, but I reposted it in the unit last night. So maybe we will watch that one together today. So that is our sort of getting started, our pre-class work. If you haven't gone through those files, do go ahead. I've put in a fabric swatch chart here for you. So if you are changing your fabrics from the pattern instructions, it just kind of helps to keep things clear. This fabric grain and cutting tips, that's an AccuQuilt document that shows you how to find your the different grains and bias in the fabric. Supply list and photo of the quilt, those are all obvious. Coming down to session 1. So even though it's unit 2, I'm not calling it month 1 or class 1, I'm doing session 1 because that's what they've called it in their instructions. So the AccuQuilt document is the session 1 pattern. And then I've created a piece called session 1 assembly, just to give you a couple of hints to as you work with as you're putting it together. So those things will be in the units. And as we keep going, I'll just keep adding more and more units to the class. So you can always get there through this unit tab here. Rooms is a place for private chats that I doubt we'll end up using. Topics is, it's a new way of tagging things. I'm not sure if we'll use that very much. Members, can you all see that? Yes, members. Yeah. Who joined. Okay, I'm not sure if your view may be a little bit different when you use this because I'm an admin. But then the last 2 tabs are more interesting. So one is media, and there are 3 different categories here. So this is all the photos that have been posted to the group. And here are the videos that have been posted to the group. And I haven't assembled anything into albums. So if you were looking for, if you saw a video, but you can't remember which unit it was in, you can come here and look at it that way. And then files is the same thing. So these are the files that have been uploaded into the group. Okay, this is the first time that I've run a Facebook group like this. So if I'm missing something or something's not where you think it should be, just let me know and we can get that sorted out. How to post your own photos and things as or ask questions. You want to do that right in here. So that's in the discussion is where you can post your questions. I hope to be able to get back to them within 24 or 48 hours, as long as life at home is going fine. That shouldn't be an issue. So feel free to go ahead and post there. You can post your photos by clicking on this link here and then selecting the photo from your computer. When the Zoom class comes up, it will be a post in here, something like this that says, it'll be a link. So that's where you will re-watch any Zoom classes that you want to. I'm going to try to put them into units, but I'm not quite sure how to do that yet. So once I figure that out, I will be also putting the links to the Zoom recording into those units. Now, as far as scheduling goes, when things will be posted each month, the videos from today's class, I have set to post at 10:30. So they should be in the group here by the time we're done. The Zoom recording, I will try to post later on today, if not first thing tomorrow. The pattern for next month's class, I will post the day after this month's class. So you've got pattern for session 1. I will post the pattern for session 2 tomorrow. And then we meet again on the 4th Tuesday. Okay. We've looked at all of the project resources, the color charts. Did everybody find the class supply list? You've got that information, okay? Everything you need, okay. Alrighty. What I would like to start with, and again, if you were one of the people that did see this, I apologize, but I do want to go over the video of finding your perfect seam allowance. And I'm going to do that a different way. Hang on a second. I'm going to open it up here. Sorry, I jumped the gun. I'm trying to do this to optimize for video so that you get the best view you can. Okay, just before I start the video, let me tell you this. This is because of the way this quilt is put together. It's called a medallion quilt, which means you start in the center and everything is built out around your center block. So even more so than in regular quilting, your accuracy is going to be critical here in this particular project, because if you're off by, let's say, 1/4 of an inch after your first block, you've got 10 months to build on top of it, you're going to be in trouble. So the AccuQuilt machine is helping us getting our fabric cut accurately, as long as we're paying attention to the grain, which as I started using AccuQuilt, would never have believed that it made such a difference which way the fabric grain goes through the machine, but it does. So watch the first video on that, because that will help keep your cutting pieces absolutely square. But then the seam allowance is the second important thing. Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed when I've watched both these videos,
Mm-hmm.
you made one quick comment at one time about the white label on the die,
Yep.
the paper label should be towards your body.
Mm-hmm.
I had never been told that. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I ever, well, obviously, since I didn't know, I'm sure I put my dies in every which way. What is the advantage of that? Or what is that about the straight of grain as well? Like, why should they be?
It's how AccuQuilt sets the shape in the die tray, I call it. So the plastic piece that holds all the die, it is designed to go through in that order. So if they have a shape that has, they will align the bias edges of the cut piece to how it best goes through the rollers. So that's a tip that I picked up from Pam Heller, who's AccuQuilt's educator that's done a few things with Kindred. So here's the little mantra I tell myself. When you're finding your grain of fabric, you want the grain to run through the cutter with the selvage of the fabric aligned with the sticker on the die, and the sticker aligned to your stomach. So selvage, sticker, stomach, those things should all be going in the same direction as it goes through the cutter. So that's my little thing that I use to remember that. AccuQuilt's document does a better job of explaining the grain of the fabric, but my other mantra is high and tight is right. So when you're snapping your fabric, to listen to the pitch of the warp and the weft, the higher direction, the sound that's higher, is the one that you want to use the grain of going through the cutter. So high and tight is right, and then selvage, sticker, stomach.
Okay, thank you.
The die. Okay, and again, it doesn't seem like it should make a difference, but it can. So if you're having a couple of issues with accuracy, just double check you've got the grain right. Okay, so here we go for the perfect seam allowance. You guys are not seeing it yet, are you?
No.
No. Okay. I'd like to show you a little. Huh. This is not what I want. Okay, I'm gonna stop our share altogether. Sorry, ladies, bear with me one sec. Hey, there we go. Okay. Now I just gotta find my play button. I'd like to show you a little trick on how to set your sewing machine seam allowance. So how to set your needle position to get the appropriate seam allowance for AccuQuilt. So what I've done here is I have grabbed the dies out of the cube. This is die number 3. It's a half square triangle. And this one is die number 5, which is the smaller half square triangle. So I've cut a piece of paper, just a scrap of paper, approximately the same size as these 2 pieces. And one at a time, I'm going to run those through the cutter. So there's the first one. And here goes the second one. Okay, so now you can see we have a half square triangle, and you'll notice the blunted corners. So that's really indicating our seam allowance. What I'm going to do is take a mechanical pencil, so I've got something fairly fine, and I'm going to draw a line from blunted corner to blunted corner. Okay, so there I've drawn my line. This one, I'm going to do it again on the smaller one just to compare and confirm our seam allowance when we get it set up at the machine. So again, I'm drawing where I would be stitching. And I'm using a mechanical pencil so that it is fairly fine. If you used a wider Sharpie, for example, you're not going to get the easy line to position your needle on. So from here, we're going to head over to the machine. Now we're going to test the seam allowance on our paper. So I have the piece of paper, I've drawn the line where the seam allowance should be, but that's in theory. I do want to check and see that our needle is a little bit on the inside of the seam allowance to make sure that there's room for the thread and the fold of the fabric. So I'm going to put the paper in place as if it were fabric, leading the edge of the paper right up to the guide on my 1/4 inch seam allowance. My machine is in the regular position that I would normally do for my scant 1/4 inch. So I'm going to put my needle down and take it up and then lift it out and have a look. So there, when I look at that, I see that my needle is a little more to the left than I would like. So I'm going to try moving it over to the right. For my first try here, I'm going to do 2 positions to the right. If you watch, my needle will move 1 and 2. It's minor. It's a very small adjustment, but let's have a look. Again, now, there I can see that just those 2 little clicks have made a difference. My thread is going to sit on the right of that marked seam allowance, which is where I want, because the thread will take up some space and folding the fabric will take up some space. So I think this is going to be pretty close to what we want to do. Again, let's just put it down and let's sew a few stitches. Oops, let's take a look. So there, that is to the right. I think if that were fabric, when it was folded back, that would probably look pretty good. So that's where I'm going to test. I'll do one at my original seam allowance and one at this new one, which is 2 clicks to the right, and we'll see how that works on our test fabric. So I'm going to cut a test swatch of fabric. I'm going to lay my smaller scrap down. I've checked my grain. I know that the grain is fine. Then I'm going to lay my larger scrap right on top of it so that it cuts the pieces together. I am running this through with the label on the die at my belly, so I know that it's going in the right direction. Now I have these 2 sets of half square triangles ready to go. So I'm going to go and put this in the machine and sew the first one with what I hope is my right seam allowance, bring it back, press it, check it. Then I'm going to see if I need to make any corrections before I sew the second one. So here's the half square triangle that we just cut. I'm going to stitch it and then press it to see if our seam allowance is as accurate as we would like it to be. So there's our first one. Okay, so I've sewn two little sample half square triangles. This is the first one. This is the one that I would normally, where I would normally have my needle position. So this is my regular scant 1/4 inch for quilting. So let's take a look at that. We're going to measure it up with my ruler. I'm using this Olfa ruler here with the diagonal line. I'm putting the diagonal right on the line of the stitching and right up to the top corner. And if you look carefully, you can see that I'm not getting all the way to that 2.5 inch line. So this block is just a little bit too small. It's only about 1/16 of an inch too small, but that's enough to make a big difference. Let's try the one where I moved my needle position over just a little bit. This is the one where the needle went in directly on the line that we drew in our pencil. This is the one where I moved my needle to the right, 2 little clicks, not a lot, just 2 little clicks to the right. And we can see when I put it on the diagonal line that that one is filling the whole 2.5 inch measure. So this is the seam allowance that we're going for. This is going to take a little bit of work, but it will be worth it because your blocks will come out more square. So if you're testing the little die, which is die number 5, I believe, your half square triangle should come out absolutely perfectly at 2.5 inches. If it's not, you're going to need to adjust your seam allowance. So to adjust the seam allowance on my machine, I'm sewing on a Baby Lock Unity. Most computerized machines will have a similar feature. I have set my machine for the straight stitch middle position, meaning the needle is coming down in the middle. That's my basic quilting 1/4 inch position. And then I know I wanted to move my needle to positions to the right. So here at the bottom is my left-right shift. When it's set at 0, that means it's in the center position. To move it to the left, I hit the minus sign, and that shows up here, minus 3/4 of a millimeter. So these are really very small adjustments. So from the basic position, I went 1 and 2 positions to the right. So that is 0.5 of a millimeter. So very small adjustment. If you're not sewing on a computerized machine, check your manual. Many machines, if you place your stitch selector on the straight stitch and then choose a stitch width and increase or decrease the stitch width, that will move your needle to the left or the right. So consult your manual to confirm how your machine works. If you're sewing on a very basic machine, you may want to use a piece of masking tape or washi tape as a guide and just place it in position across the bed of your machine once you find the perfect seam allowance. There are also other tools on the market to help you with this. Talk to your local quilt shop if you need assistance with this on your machine. Just as one final check, I'm going to sew one of our bigger triangles. So this is die number 3. We're going to sew the half square triangle with all of our settings the way we plan to use them in our quilt. Again, okay, I'm going to save you the boring detail of watching me check the second block, but essentially I did the same thing with the second block. That was the larger piece, and made sure that it filled the final square exactly. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Does everyone know how to adjust the needle position on their machine?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So it really is worth the time to spend a few minutes checking. Write it on a Post-it note, or if you've got a machine with a memory, set it in your memory so that you know every time you sit down to work on this project that that's the seam allowance that you're using. And as I completed the different components of the block, I measured them again just to make doubly sure. And I did have one that was not right. And guess which one it was? The very center. I had to do my very center square twice because the first one was too small. So I think, again, thank you for your patience if you'd already seen that, but I do think that that's a valuable thing to pay attention to. The next thing I want to do is go over the actual pattern page with you quickly. So again, I'm going to try to share my screen. Whoops, that's not the one I want. Hang on. Okay, so here is our pattern for session 1. See, Barbara, look, there's your fabric. Right in there, that little blue dot is the same one that you've got. On each monthly pattern, they're a little unusual because there's no text in this pattern. So I thought I should point out a few things to you that I didn't notice at first. So if you look in the top right-hand corner here, you can see the required die numbers for this month's piecing. So that's all right there. Then if you look at the chart further down, you can see the number of patches to cut versus the die number. I found this, I had to really pay attention to what I was doing here. So your die number 5, which is your little half square triangle here, you're cutting 24 of those in your red fabric. And this is where the color matching key, hi Cameron, I see you there. This is where the color matching key comes in helpful. If you're red, for example, my red isn't red, it's pink. So then I know that I need 24 pink number 5s. At the bottom here, you can see it'll tell you what size your quilt should measure at the time that you finished this piece, or some months you're only doing your piecing blocks and not actually attaching them together yet. So, but this blue band also has information. So the top, as I'm done, my block is 20.5 inches square. Your fabric swatch chart tells you what color you need. You could also put in your own swatches there if you need to. And in other places, in other patterns for other months, in here, instead of saying the top will measure 20.5, it may say save for a later unit. So you may make 10 blocks and save them for the next month when you build them into a border. So there's lots of useful information on that. There's just absolutely no text showing. What time is it? 10:46. So I will show you.
I have a question there.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about the diagram versus the chart when it comes to sets.
Okay.
Because the diagram says
so do you mean 4. Right down here?
Yep. At the bottom, it's at the bottom.
Sorry, we are delayed.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. I didn't realize, I didn't want to know what sets mean. The last three cuts. Navy set, green set, what sets?
Okay, so right down in here, because these sets, so 14, for example, they are directional. So you couldn't cut 4 of only one side of it. They have to be cut as a set. I'm not explaining that very well.
You're talking left and right.
Yes, essentially you're talking left and right. So it's only the die number 9 because it has the angles here, that there is a left and a right side, and then die number 14, that there's a left and a right side. Both 14 on this block and 14 on this block. So it's still, when they say 4, yeah, so here the first one where it says 4 star, 4 sets, it's because you're making 4 blocks like this one. So you need 4 lefts and 4 rights. Does that clarify?
It does help. So when you're loading it into the die, that means you're actually cutting 8. So the first 4 would have to be face down and the next 4 would have to face up.
Your die number 14.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say, just beneath there, it says, like with the asterisks, it's saying that the sets require right or wrong sides together. So when you're making a set, you'd be doing it with 2 pieces of fabric, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure how big. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
So this is die 14. It cuts both at the same time. So if you...
That would be one set.
This is one, is it?
No, that's
Yeah,
two
it'd be one
lefts.
set. If it's a
No,
left and a right, it'd be
yeah, this is 2 lefts because they're rotated.
Oh.
So you, what I did was I stacked 4. How did I do it?
I think it
Stack
only
4.
comes into play if you have a fabric that has the right and wrong side. So if you put one piece of, like as someone said, look at the little notation at the bottom. So you put 2 pieces of fabric in, right sides together,
Yeah.
and run it through, then you're going to get your lefts and rights right there.
That's correct.
The
So when you
fabrics are-
put in 2
yeah.
pieces of fabric right sides together, you get 2 complete sets. Okay, so to get your to make 4 blocks, you need 4 pieces of fabric to essentially 2 facing up and 2 facing down is going to give you your 4 sets. Okay, that will become very obvious. It's much easier to do it than it is to explain it.
Yeah.
As soon as you cut it, you're going to see you've got 2 lefts or 2 rights. Okay,
If you have directional fabric though, that's going to come into play.
you're right. If you've got directional fabric, that is going to come into play. However, if you have directional fabric, these, when you go back up to the block, it's, I think I might want to just let it go, and as far as how your direction goes, and let it, because you're going to have to, otherwise you'd have to cut knowing where in the
The
quilt
die you're using.
each different piece
Yeah.
of fabric is going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about that sheet? No, we're good. Okay.
Seam allowances, you press it all to the dark side, or can you press them open?
In general, I did press to the dark side. When I was assembling the final block, there were a couple of seams that I pressed open because of the bulk that was building up. They don't give you any instruction here whatsoever. I think typically where people press their seams is kind of a personal preference. My goal was to reduce the bulk. So where possible, I pressed to the dark, and then the only place I did open, I think, check. Yeah, the only place I did any open was in my my big seams as I was assembling the whole block together. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to go over, I'm conscious of your time. It's 10 to 11. I'm going to show you the Flying Goose video for how I assembled that unit. The other videos will be in the group, so you can watch them. So I've done 5 to essentially show you how to assemble each different component of the block. A lot of it is, is if you've used the AccuQuilt before, is fairly obvious, but for people who have not used it, I thought it would be helpful to see that right at the machine. But let's watch the Flying Geese one together, and then probably the square and a square one, because those were the 2 that I think are a little bit more difficult. So bear with me while I try this again. I wish I could just leave it on video, but apparently, whoops. Okay. Hey, I think it's gonna work. All right. Sorry. Now we're working on the Flying Goose units. I am going to have we hold them
right side up like this, we have two choices. We can put on the wing on the right side first or the left side first. I'm going to do the wing on the left side, and that's because when I get ready to stitch, I'm going to go in right through that point. If I did the other side, I'd have to take a few stitches up here where there's no fabric underneath, and that would guaranteed end up in my machine. So we're going to put the wing on the left-hand side first, and then stitch from the outside corner to the middle. Here we are getting ready to put the left-hand wing on our flying goose. I'm going to start with a leader. Make sure I get everything aligned. And start stitching that left-hand one on. A couple of back stitches to secure. Now, I'm just going to do a test one to start, so I'm going to stitch onto my next leader so that when I come back to the machine, I'm all ready to go. I'm going to take this piece to the iron, set my seam, and then press it back. So I took my piece to the iron, pressed that open. Now I'm coming up with the second wing, so this is the right-hand side wing. I have aligned my corner here, and you'll see my upper corner meets right at the top of the first section that was pieced. So I'm going to stitch this time from the center out because I have a nice edge to start with up there. It's not going to get sucked down into the machine. And now we can see when we press this open, we're going to have that nice flying goose unit. Here's one that I pieced previously. It's coming up beautifully square. The flying geese units should measure 2.5 inches tall by 4.5 inches wide. Again, do yourself a test one, measure, make sure it's perfect, and then continue on. We have lots of different colors of these to piece. One is, according to the pattern, the red and white, and one is the green and red. So go ahead and complete the flying goose sections for your first block.
Okay. Anybody have any questions there? In the first video where I did the half square triangles, I talked a little bit about leaders and enders. Has everyone used those before?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So it just keeps it from getting sucked down into the machine. Okay, the next and last one I think I'm going to show you is the square in a square. So that's the very center unit of the block. That's the one that I had to make twice. So I'm going to show you how to do it and then tell you what not to do like I did the first time.
Lori, does everyone have a single hole needle plate? Because that really helps on the machine as well.
Yeah, and I did talk about that in that first video. I never use mine because I forget to switch it back out.
It's so good.
Yeah. If especially if all you're doing is piecing, then the single hole needle plate is a great advantage. So for those of you that don't know, it is the the metal piece right underneath the needle, and it has a smaller hole. So there's one round hole set in the center section, as opposed to the regular needle plate, which has a much wider hole to accommodate things like a zigzag stitch where you're not much wider space is required. So it's much less likely that the fabric will get pushed down into the machine by the needle. Again, yeah, I know a lot of people swear by it. I just forget to change it. So I'm afraid I'm going to break a needle and throw my timing off by not doing that. Okay. Here we go.
To make the center square in a square unit, you'll notice that when you put the fabric right sides together, this is one of the few times when the fabric doesn't align. There's no simple spot to line it up. So what I recommend that you do is take each of your triangles and find the center of the long side. I'm marking mine with my paper piecing roller. So I'm marking the center of each one just by putting them matching sides together like that. And then just in the corner, roll it to get a nice sharp crease. So I'll do that for all 4. You can just do this with your fingernail if you don't have a seam roller. And then to correspond, I'm going to take the center square and mark it the center point on each side. I'm doing the square wrong sides together and each of the triangles right sides together so that they will fit. So now when you're getting ready to sew these, you have to sew the opposite sides first. So I'm going to put the first one there, and with both of those points pressed, it matches in nicely. So you're going to want to move your triangle out to the very edge on each side and stitch your regular seam allowance on each side. Then you're going to come press those back and stitch the opposite sides, again matching the points. So here I have the units. I've pinned them in place. Be careful when you're handling these. These small pieces with the bias edges are pretty stretchy. You're going to want to stretch, so handle them gently. So I sewed the one side. I'm going to sew onto my leader and start the next side. So here's the first side stitched, and I'm going to take this and press these sides back and look for the creases that we folded in previously to match up the other triangles. As we sew the second side on, you may be able to see that the blunted end of the triangle now lines up with the first set of triangles that have been sewn on. So here's the first set. The blunted ends are lining up, but still be sure to use that center point that we folded to match the center first and then your outside edges for accuracy. And then we're going to stitch these last 2 triangles on. So here we are. Now I'm going to press these open and I'm going to measure the square, and it should measure exactly 4.5 inches. If it does not, I recommend that you remake this square until it measures exactly 4.5 inches, because this is the very center of your whole quilt. This is, if the first one isn't right, you're going to be expanding an error as you add each different level. So let's measure this up and make sure that it's 4.5 inches.
Okay, so as I said, I measured my first one. It was not 4.5 inches. And that's because I had just sort of tried to center the triangle on that edge of the square the first time. And I was nowhere near as accurate as I thought I was. So by the time it was done, I was down by about 1/8 of an inch, which was way, way too small. So just making those creases and lining them up, particularly on the first side, will help keep that nice and square. So that's probably the most important one, to make sure it's exactly 4.5 inches when it's done. Okay, any questions on that? No. All righty. So what I'm going to do now is just show you the document I've done to just highlight the assembly, because they do nothing. They just, tell you to put it together and according to the diagram, which makes sense in most cases. But we've started out making 4 of that unit, 4 of this unit, and then combine the 2 of them to end up with 4. Those are your outside corners, the quadrants. Then your middle row, then your top and bottom row, you're adding this in. So you've got your original unit. There's 1 and 2 with that middle one that we've made just on the left to make your top and bottom row. This is your center row here, and combining the whole thing to this. Now, before I started this assembly process, I had measured each one of these components just to make sure that they were right, okay? And found that that was the easiest way to make it accurate. So when I got to that part, I thought, okay, great, we've done very well. The next thing to assemble is all of these little half square triangles. And this, again, I did not do, but I should have. Once I had assembled this row, I should have measured it to make sure that it was exactly 16.5 inches in length, okay? If yours measures up too short, open up a couple of seam allowances, take a slightly more scant seam allowance when you sew them together until it measures 16.5. If yours measures too long, then choose a couple of spots and just take a thread or 2 bigger of a seam allowance to make this exactly perfect. So that is which one is this? This is the side ones here, and this is the top and bottom ones here. So the sides measure 16.5, the top and bottom ones measure 20.5. And that way, when you put it on the center part of your square, you're pulling it into square essentially. So if the center of your square wasn't exactly right, but you know that this essentially here is acting as a pieced border, you know that this pieced border is exactly right, then you're going to pull this unit to be absolutely square. So when you're putting this together, or in any situation where you're putting a border on, if you know that this border is cut to measure, you pin the outsides first, and then the center, and then pin along the length. And invariably one is going to be bigger than the other. So if your border is a little bit bigger than your block, what you're going to do is sew with the border down. This is another one of my little mantras. You remember that movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where they had the soggy bottom boys? Well, this is where I say it's always the baggy bottom, and that's how I remember it. You want your baggier piece on the bottom, because your feed dogs will help ease that difference in. So if your center block here was, say, 1/4 of an inch shorter, and you attach it to this border that's the accurate length, you can help ease it in just that little bit. So that's the sides, and then I've turned it in the top and bottom. Is that right? I think. Yes, that's right. This unit is actually sideways. I'm sorry about that. I should have had this one turned 90 degrees, because it is the top and bottom that has the white square on the end. Does that make sense? Talking about the borders a little bit?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, it is.
About that.
Okay, let me, I'm gonna stop the share there so I can see everybody again. Okay, go ahead.
Barbara, you go first.
Oh, no, I have something else. You go ahead.
Okay, so in theory, if your border piece is exactly right at 20.5, and your center is 20.25, and you ease in the extra 1/4 of the border, then your overall shape isn't going to be 20.5. It's going to be closer to 20.25.
Yes, but it's going to be better than if you just trimmed the border, right? Which is what the temptation some people do when they put a quilt border. I'm sure Jennifer, with this long armor, you've seen this, where some people just they put the border on without measuring it, and then they just trim the border to match the center of the quilt, and that's where you get really wavy borders.
Yeah.
It will help. It's not a perfect system, but it's about as perfect as I can figure out to help keep your project as square as possible. Particularly here, it's more that I want you to make sure that that pieced border is as close to accurate as possible. Obviously you want the center as close to accurate as possible as well. But this is just one more place where you can check. Okay. My finished block is out by, I think about 1/8 of an inch on one side and getting on towards 1/4 on the other side, once I've got all the outside borders on. But the very next thing that we do is put a solid border around the whole thing. So I'm hoping that between getting my pieced borders as close to the measurement as I can, then my next border is a solid, that by the time I've got that all done, I should be back pretty close to in square. Do you have anything to add on that, Jen? Am I explaining that?
No, I think that's right. I mean, that's the most common thing that I have problems with as a long armor is people don't measure their borders. They just cut us, a 4-inch strip and just sew it on and hack it off. And it's like, oh my God. Yeah, it's bad. People don't realize how bad it is because they can hold up their quilt and go, oh, it looks good. And the minute you put it on a long arm, you're like, Karen's starting to experience that, right?
So it's about trying to control that wave as much as you can. And that's why if you're reading instructions on how to put a quilt border, they say measure the length of your quilt in 3 different places, cut your side borders to that size, pin at the outside edges in the center, and then ease the rest in, as it's just trying to tug and pull everything back into square. So we only get a couple of chances to do that in this quilt. If you look at the overall image, so as I said, the next thing we do is add on a little framing border, and then we add a pieced border and another block and one more framing border. So that's why, you know, it's important as we go to try and keep things as square as we can. Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
My question is, everybody that knows me knows I'm a computer dummy. So this is just a question just for myself. Everything that you just showed us.
Yes.
Okay. How do I find that again so I can watch it? I need a step-by-step. How do I get into the group? Where do I go? How do I find it?
Hang on, I'm just trying to see if it has arrived. Yay, oh, it worked, okay. I sound surprised when
So is it going to be under units? Where is it going to be?
okay, so here we are again, back in the group. You guys can all see that.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so at the moment, because I posted this last night and scheduled it to come up at 10 o'clock, 10:30 rather. So here is our session 1, video 1, half square triangles. Oh, look, video 5, video 4, video 2, video 3. Isn't that great when Facebook does that? But anyways, you can see the different videos. They are here in the discussion tab. Basically, everything that is new to the group pops up in the discussion as a kind of flagging it for you. So it doesn't just go right into units and have you not notice that it was there. I am going to do my best to have these posted under the unit.
Okay.
Don't quite know how that's going to work yet, but oh, look, see here, I'm going
Barb,
to
just so you know.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that eventually
Barb,
will
yes.
show up.
If you're doing it on your iPhone or your iPad or your computer, they're all different.
I know, I'm on an iPad. That's all I have.
Okay. So there's a couple options for you, Barb. They should be in the discussion. They should also go, I'm hoping they will end up in the units, but if worst comes to worst, don't forget you've got this media tab over here. And when you click on the media tab and videos, they are all going to show up there.
Oh, yeah, excellent. Right.
Okay, so there should be a few different ways to find them. As I say, I'm hoping that I'll be able to get them into that unit tab right away. So I'm going to try and do that when we get off. And then that way, by the end of the class, we're going to have a lot of videos floating around. So I showed you, I think, 2 of those videos. There are 5 there. If you are bored, go ahead and watch them. If I'm beating you over the head with the obvious, then feel free to skip that. That's no problem. Okay, any other questions about the layout within the group? No? Okay. Then I'm going to come back to you here. All right, so that is, I'm just checking my notes here. I think that's the end of the content that I've got for you today, except for those videos that we didn't watch, but you can certainly do that on your own. Any other questions? Text suggestions, you're able to hear okay?
Yeah, you did a great job, Tori.
Okay,
Just a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Can you send me the other units so I can design an EQ without being to the other group to confuse us?
Yeah, I can.
That'd be great, just because then I can design and I can post them for you, and then they can color if they want to change.
Yeah, I do have the whole pattern. As a group, we can go over that. Would you guys like to have the whole thing, or do you want it dished out to you one at a time? I see Marcia saying, yeah, she wants it.
I prefer the whole.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. All right.
I prefer the whole.
Then is I will post the complete pattern all as one PDF document. So if you want it, it's there. If you want to kind of peek ahead and see what's coming next, it's all there. But I will still dole it out to you 1 month at a time, one pattern at a time. Okay. As some people,
that's perfect.
Some people like it to be a mystery. I'm not good with mysteries. I want to be able to control what's happening before,
Me too. Me
before we
too.
get there. Okay.
I have one question again. What's the goal to be at what point by next February 23rd?
So what I'm thinking is that February 23rd, is that the date?
I think that's the 4th Tuesday in February.
I'm thinking that you spend this next time working on what we just did, and so that you have your center block complete and are ready to move on to the next step. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I know that life gets in the way and you know, some months you may have more time than others. So you will have, by tomorrow, you'll have the pattern for the next month. And as we just discussed, I'm going to put the whole thing there. So if you want to skip ahead a little bit, that's great. If you want to skip ahead with just your cutting, but not do any of the piecing until we get together, and I can point out some areas where I tripped up and maybe save you from making the same error, that's fine. Okay. All right, well, feel free to send me any comments if there's something you'd like to see done a little bit differently. I am going to post the full pattern for those of you that want to see it. And feel free to encourage each other. Send us, send us photos and see how you're coming along, especially the ladies who haven't got your fabric yet. I can't wait to see what it looks like. That's my favorite part of doing classes, is to see how everyone is doing the same pattern, but the projects look so different based on our color choices. That's a lot of fun. Yeah. All right, lovely to see you all. Nice to meet you, Jan and Marcia, and nice to see the rest of you, and have a good snowy day.
Yeah.
Thanks, you too, Tori.
All right.
Bye.
Excellent. Good job.
Thank you.